Hi everyone and welcome. I'm down here in my basement, better known here on my channel as my wormery. And the reason I call it my wormery is because in those bins behind me I've got a whole bunch of worm bins, all composting my kitchen scraps, and sometimes I even bring in garden waste, collected leaves, all kinds of stuff that the worms can break down into a really nice compost. To me it seems like a better option than just dumping stuff in the everyday trash and sending it off to a landfill somewhere. So the two bins that I was going to check in on today, they're not even due for a feeding because 7 days ago, a week ago when I was last down here to tend to these two bins, they got a pretty generous feeding, and I did notice at that time that there was a good amount of leftover food from the previous feeding even. So I even commented in that video a week ago when I was feeding my African nightcrawler bins that, you know, these bins are probably going to go well beyond a week before they need to be fed again. But there were a couple loose ends when I was in those bins. And if you've been following along, then you'll know that within my African nightcrawler systems, I've been coping with, for the past few weeks now, I've been coping with a little bit of a mite infestation issue. And I think the issue was worse a number of weeks ago. And I've attempted to apply certain measures to try to reduce their numbers. Stuff like, first I think I tried drying the bins for a while because the mites thrive in a damp situation. I then decided I would withhold feedings from the containers for a while. There too, the lack of food could potentially lead to the reduction of mites. I even took a last step of putting some crushed pulverized lime into the containers to try to see if maybe it's a pH imbalance situation, because I believe that the mites thrive in a more acidic environment. So I was trying to neutralize the pH, if that was in fact the reason for the mites being so great in numbers. Over time, it does seem like things have gotten a little bit better, but there's definitely still mites in there. And during the last feeding, I did acknowledge it, and I did, regardless of that, feed, and I did cover up again with plastic, which does permit the recirculation of moisture. But I thought I'd go back into those bins today, not to feed, but to try to apply a couple of those countermeasures again. Number one, I was going to put a little bit more lime into those systems because thanks to a comment from one of my viewers, I was informed of the fact that that stuff actually does take time, so be patient. And it does seem like I should be able to apply another dose of that stuff because it's been a couple weeks since that went in. And the other thing I was going to do was, at the end of going in there to apply the lime and check things out, not put back the plastic coverings so as to allow the systems to start drying out again a little bit, hopefully resulting in the reduction of mites a little bit. So I've got some stats here on this little board here. Sometimes I like to take some notes just to remind myself of some of the information pertaining to what I'm going to be working on. So like I mentioned earlier, these are African night crawlers, although a lot of viewers don't seem to think they're actually African night crawlers, so I don't even know really what they are. But not knowing what they are, I just keep continuing to call them what I was told they were when I got them as cocoons originally. And the stuff here is just describing the containers. I went into a little bit more detail describing the containers that these are in because it's just funny how I've got some weird names for some of these containers. Like the VermiBag Tote isn't just the VermiBag Tote. The VermiBag Tote actually sits inside what I refer to as one of my TNN, tall and narrow, new containers. And it's the number 2 container in that naming category. Here too, the younger of the two bins. It's the bin that I refer to in my tracking spreadsheet as my bin with holes number 1. And since it's a bin with holes, I didn't want to have stuff coming out the bottom, so I placed bin with holes number 1 into bin with holes number 2. Alright, so the only other stuff you see here is the age of the bins, as well as the number of feedings that each bin has received up to now. So, like I said, not feeding today. Going to apply some lime. When we put things away, we're going to remove the plastic, or not put the plastic back, in the hopes that things are going to dry a little bit. And then we'll probably come back, I guess depending on what we see today, at a later time, maybe in a few more days to feed. But today it's just tending to what I think are somewhat loose ends from previous check-ins. So let's get to work. So I got a couple of these we're going to apply this stuff right here. You can see right there, it's got a pretty long label. If I don't know if someone wants to take the time to read it. But I mean, it just starts out by saying, you know, calcium carbonate acts as a neutralizer, and it's used for its ability to absorb and neutralize acids. Blah, blah, blah. Instructions for applying it to your garden as a garden soil amendment. But, you know, I guess when you're in a worm bin situation, you think you might have an acidic situation. This is the stuff, I guess, to use to try to balance that out. So, let's get these things filled up. We're set with the lime. I went up to maybe 3/4 of the way full on each of these, and let's go for the bins. Alright, so like I said, the first thing that's going to go is this plastic here. That's what's doing all the work and keeping the moisture in the bin. If things are really, yeah, if I really want things to evaporate out nicely, that cardboard's going to have to go too. I think the only thing that's going to remain is what's in here now is the sheet of newspaper. The only question is whether it's going to survive our manhandling as we check in on the bin. If it survives, it remains intact, then it's going to be the cover. We'll just fold this in half. Hopefully it remains damp and cozy enough for them to not get all bugged out. No, actually, we'll place the paper on top of it. That is, if this paper will allow for one more reuse. It's been going for a while. I should start keeping track. I've been sort of challenging myself to see how careful I could be with the paper and make it last multiple uses. Obviously, depending on how much it gets chewed out and eaten up by the worms, but also how much I can keep it intact while I'm handling it as carefully as I can. Okay, just set this aside. Hopefully no rogue worms who get all freaked out by being evicted suddenly like this out of their space. This piece seems to be holding up a little bit better. A little bit of wear here, but not as much as that first piece. Maybe there's something else going on this side of the bin that's more interesting or something like that. Yeah, this last piece of paper is just a way that I mark where I last fed. Some of my bins are getting fed in the corners, but in these I'm just feeding right down the middle. So the paper in the middle just indicates where we last fed. I'm not gonna really try to disturb the food or blend it in or anything like that, but we will take a look to see how much of it remains. This will just help us understand a little bit better when to do the next feeding. You can already start to see some of the reasons I'm wanting to do this. All these little white specks, mites. You give them a couple minutes and the worms tend to clear out when the lights are shining overhead. I can still see a couple here and there. The mites are not quite as reactive to the light, so they just keep hanging out where they are, even if the lights come on overhead. There's a little stuff in here that look a little bit larger, but this stick just shatters in my hand, so it's very weak in structure already. Just still has its kind of original shape. I'll tell you, this material looks so nice, but it's got all these little white specks, which I'd love to see reduced greatly in numbers. It's so nice when even on the outer edges the material's got this kind of just right moisture level, sort of. And I'm just going to start piling this stuff in here. guess now we're sort of traversing the area where we fed. But I still think the stuff would probably be a little bit lower down underneath. I guess we can probably poke around in there a little bit. Let's get this stuff blended in. And before we put things away, we can take a closer look. See how the food supply is holding up. Got a little bit left here. We'll just scatter it evenly. It doesn't even seem like all that much after you get it in here. I don't know, I forget what it said on the container, but I mean, it's talking about large volumes to be spread out over an entire garden or something like that, so I'm not sure. I think it'll blend in pretty nicely. It's just minerals, I guess, from the worm's perspective. So this is only my second attempt at doing this stuff. So I'm just sort of mimicking what I've heard and seen on YouTube and other places. So hoping that I'm going about this in a way that has some chance of succeeding. I know oftentimes people that have already tried stuff like this watch and probably have some great input. I'd love to hear if anyone has done this and how they went about doing it, and am I at least coming close to doing it right? I hope so. I generally don't use any sort of chemicals in my gardens. They just get water. That's all I do. Naturally, this stuff all here, this vermicompost all gets used as part of my potting mix when I put my plants into the garden, but you know, during the year some people apply stuff like Miracle Grow or fertilizers and stuff like that. I don't do any of that stuff. You know, I'm just going to start reacting to what I find here because I am a little bit surprised. So I think from the lime application perspective, we're pretty much done, but just, you know, what I'm on the lookout for here is a big pile of what I thought would be leftovers, because it seemed like they had so much food in here. And maybe I'm just not in the right area yet. Whatever these are, maybe this is the rice. I had some old leftover rice and I kept forgetting to bring down into the wormery to feed to the worms, and it just got really nasty sitting around the kitchen. Finally remembered to come down here, and some of it came into this container here, but it was already green when I put it in. It's got that little bit of a yellow color to it because it was seasoned up with some seasonings that colored it yellow. It's just a regular kind of plain old white rice. I don't see anything else. Well, I shouldn't speak so soon because here's some more stuff, but you know, I guess when I say stuff, I'm thinking more in terms of like chunks of vegetables or something. I think everything we're finding here is pretty far gone, or is some of the bedding that we used to feed with. Paper towel on this go around, it seems. Banana peel, that's something that's not going to go that quickly. But I am sort of starting to get that sense that things do go a lot more quickly in this bin than I thought. I was expecting to see all kinds of leftovers, but it seems like they just got really hungry over this past week and seem to have done away with almost everything. I'm going to stick to keeping this as just a sort of a lime application. This is the way it's going back on the shelf. A lot of fairly exposed areas over there on the side. That'll dry out pretty quickly. The paper's actually going to let a lot of moisture through it itself too, so that's going to dry off pretty quickly too. So we'll see how this comes along in the next few days, but I do feel like I should probably be back here in 2 or 3 days to give them some food soon, because they went through this stuff a lot more quickly than I expected. So that's great. That's a good sign. Let's get the other one out here. Alright, so here we are with bin with holes number 1. This number 1 is the one that has the little hole in the handle. But number 1's also kind of busted up at this point. It's been around for a while. So it's got a number of replacements that are deeper. I haven't been buying these shallow ones. When I do get an opportunity to pick up some bins in the store, I'll always go with the deeper ones. I don't see any worms on the plastic here. That's unusual, going from one bin to the other, just such a difference. What do we got going on here? Here, clearly visible. A big turnout over here with the mites. These two worms here are kind of hooking up. A lot of times the exposure to the light kind of makes the worms all want to scatter, but I feel bad for these guys because they've got nowhere to dive down to if they wanted to really get out of the light. Because they got this piece of paper in the way. All covered in all these nice fresh castings. Every time I check in, all the castings fall off. But the next time you check in, any castings that you find are ones that have, accumulated there in the meantime. Oh, there's one guy burrowing through. Actually, both of these guys are in the process of trying to burrow through. That's actually the mating pair right there. All right, let's give them a break. Get them off. And man, all these mites on this piece of paper almost makes me feel like just taking this piece of paper outside and giving this bin a fresh covering, because I'm not doing a very good job of keeping this piece of paper intact. I mean, technically I'm holding it with one hand and it's off the surface, so it's one piece still. Very tempting to try to use it. It's so full of holes, although that would be good too, right? More opportunity for the bin to dry. We'll ponder the option here as we apply the lime. I don't know, I'll put it back on if it looks like it's gonna make it a little while longer. What the heck? I wonder if we're in for a surprise here too in terms of leftovers. Let's see, how did we do this? Whatever, it doesn't matter much, right? Just kind of till up a section and season it up. What's this? I guess we can check out the leftovers as we encounter them, working our way across. Here again, the feeding would have been down the middle as the coffee filter indicated, and we're seeing bits and pieces of its surface here already. This is the root of a coral rob. This is some bedding, maybe coffee filters. There's a whole bunch of leftovers in this one. This is an old mango seed, or the outer husk of one. More veggie cuttings. There's a lot of leftovers in this one. This must have been the bin that I was thinking of that needed pretty much nothing in terms of food because it had so much, and then we even added more last time we were in here. So we don't need to excavate every single piece of material out of here. I think I've already got a sense of the fact that maybe we don't bother adding more food to this one. Maybe we can come back, take care of feeding the VermiBag Mini. Maybe we let this one just ride for a while, because all these leftovers, this is going to last a good long time. Alright, well, I'm sure there's other large chunks of food down here, chunks of bedding. Here things look even a little more intact, because this little food bundle is still sort of one item. You can see it's been occupied by worms and it's full of castings. Things look really nice down here. Yeah, let's sprinkle some all over their food. Get the food all right back down where it came from. All that bedding, all that good stuff that they like so much. And then we'll know where to find them next time we come back in here. Here too, the material's really nice, but even out here on the outskirts, I'm still finding old food scraps. Maybe a month-old banana stem, if my guess is right. Just based on the amount of deterioration you could see in it. Here are two other varied bits and pieces of food scrap. Okay. I guess we'll sort of do a back sweep and get everything mixed together. But, you know, mites in this bin are still pretty high in number. So I'm sure the drying out's going to help a lot too. Guess we'll give this whole shebang one more little sort of stir. Maybe a little more carefully down the middle where the food is. Try to keep everything submerged. Maybe we pile up high over the food and then we'll level things off after that. Maybe we'll get a little bit better coverage. Definitely a good stir up too. So I guess this one's it's going to be good for a while. And you know, I'm even wondering about the other one that we just fed, the VermiBag Mini. If I did want to start steering that one towards harvest, then I don't know. Maybe it doesn't need to have any more feedings. That material looks so nice in there. I will be back in here in the next couple days, I think. If I'm feeding that other bin. If I'm not, then maybe it'll just keep going. But I'll still want to check in because with such a drastic change in the coverings, you know, taking the plastic off is going to really allow the bins to start airing out a lot, drying out a lot. I wouldn't want to let that situation kind of spiral out of control. So I'll be keeping it, you know, an eye on it just to make sure things are drying out, but in a nice, you know, controlled fashion. Here's the moment of truth. My goodness. I wonder if this thing can still be sort of draped out to cover up the bin. I guess the nice thing is that there was a lot of excess material that was sort of just riding up the side walls. Maybe we take advantage of that and sort of push a lot of the more tattered material in towards the center to account for gaps and voids. Getting some pretty good coverage. What we got going on here? Big opening. Doesn't matter. I think we're even better covered than the other bin that we just took care of. It's all these little guys I'd like to see vanish. Alright, so that's where we stand now with my lime-treated African nightcrawler containers. And, well, the VermiBag Mini that we just checked in on before could probably use a feeding. Whether I feed or not is still up in the air, so I guess I'll have to decide next time I come back down in here. And hopefully you'll be back here to join me when I do that. So be sure to keep an eye on my channel. Subscribe if you haven't already, because then it'll alert you if I've got some new material online. But really quick, before I sign off, let me just say thank you. Thanks so much for watching. I hope you enjoyed the video. If you did, please remember to leave me a quick thumbs up. That's always really appreciated. All right, everyone, have a great day. Thanks so much for watching. Bye-bye.